Yeah, what's good, Joe? Shaman the Bigga P, and now usually I do videos pretty much after after a fight card, a specific fight card, but there hasn't been a lot of I mean, there haven't been a lot of noteworthy fights lately. I mean, there've been fights, but not like nothing that I would want to go into any long discussions about. But what I do want to talk about is something related to boxing, obviously, and that's the belt situation in this sport. Now, I mean, when I started watching boxing, I started watching boxing when I was a little kid. Backstory on that is my father was a fight fan, and back in the '80s, late '80s, he begot himself a VCR, and he used to tape pretty much every fight that came on HBO, Showtime, on ABC, CBS, all those channels, ESPN. And he used to and used to tape them and used to put them in this little compartment that we had in our living room. And and I used to just watch him, and sometimes either my uncle would come over or a couple of the other fathers from the neighborhood, and I used to see him get really into and I used to get him used to see him get really into the fights. So I was curious. I decided, on as a kid, I used to watch along with it, and I was hooked. Um, Watching the fights, me 4 or 5 years old, I'm watching Sugar Ray fights. I'm watching Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson, all those fighters. And during the time, when as I got more understanding, I wanted to understand the belt situation, like who was the champion, what were the sanctioning bodies. And back in the late '80s, it was WBC, WBA, and IBF. Um, WBO came along later, but WBO, in the late '80s and early '90s was pretty much, was a joke. Um, Not to put it down, but that's what it was. No one really took the belt seriously. Pretty much, any fighter that wanted a shot at a major title and they had a WBO title, they dropped it and went after the bigger prize. And also too, at the time, it was NABF and the USBA. Those I understood as what we call the minor titles. Basically, the titles, basically, if you want to get yourself like a top 10 ranking or something, then those are titles you get on your way up to the top to world title contention. And that's how I was understood champion. Like now I understand, yes, there were times where of course you can't unify all 3 or 4 titles, for the division. And sometimes because organization sanctioned bodies don't like to work together, so to speak. Like, if you hold one title, then you gotta give up the other title. Else, you get stripped of the title. I mean, I understand that business. But even then, it was still easy to say, hey, who's the IBF champion? Who's the WBA champion? Who's the WBC champion? Who's the WBO champion? It was straightforward, 80s and into the 90s. Um, and then it gets a little bit, starting in the 2000s, that's when it starts getting a little bit, it started breaking. I think this was the 2000s was the first time I ever heard of interim. I think it was the WBC that actually that crossed my mind. I think it was for I think it was the middleweight title or whatever. Even though Bernard Hopkins was more or less undisputed at by that time, and I always thought interim titles were stupid. At the time, I thought, what the hell is an interim title? Um, because in my experience, that if a champion, cannot fulfill his championship obligations or doesn't face the right contender, he just gets stripped. He's not a champion. Or if he gets injured, he gets stripped of the title. There's not like, and it goes on to fight, whoever's 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or whatever combination. But eventually, it's just the title will become vacant, and then a new champion will be crowned. That's how I've always understood belts, and that's how I've always expected belts. Like, if of course, yes, if we can't have if we can't have one champion in one weight class like they used to do in the old days, then yes, then I want to see one champion for one sanctioning body in one division. That's pretty much about it. Now boxing today is overrun with titles. Pretty much anyone can call themselves a champion. Yes, you get. You mean you. I mean, you got the ones you may call who's the man at that division. Like point example, let's just say the man division. We could say that let's do 168. Everyone knows Andre Ward is the champion. Um, or if we go to light heavyweight champion Adonis Stevenson, or if we go to heavyweights, Vladimir Klitschko. We all know. Or if we go to 140, it's Danny Garcia. I mean, now, to know who that is, obviously you got to watch a lot of boxing. You follow the fights to actually know who the man is in each individual division. And and of course, now who's the man in the division. But then you got your regular champions. The ones who don't who are who won the actual title in the ring or vacated or whatever. But now again to distinctions like super or regular or champion emeritus or diamond or silver or interim, and it's like, what do all these titles mean? Like, why should we have so many belts in one division? And that's another thing too. Having champions, having multiple champions in one weight class within one sanctioning body is pretty much the most absurd thing I've seen. One of the most absurd things I've seen in boxing. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, let's go to the heavyweight example. Now everyone knows the Klitschko's pretty much rule the heavyweight division. Vitaly holds the WBC title. Vladimir holds WBA, IBF, the WBO, and then the IBO title, whatever. But everyone knows those titles are held by the Klitschko's. Now, there is a third heavyweight in there that holds a belt. Povetkin. He holds the WBA. He's because the what was it, Vlad? He holds the WBA heavyweight title, but it's not the regular heavyweight title. No, it's like I don't even know what it's like. It's interim or no, it's like regular. How's they do it? It's like Vlad is super and Povetkin's like regular. It does point blank saying it doesn't make any sense. And all these titles, all these distinctions, it makes absolutely no sense and really has no place in boxing. You see, and one of the biggest complaints when I talk to casual people about who watch boxing pretty much when there's a big fight or a fight that actually gets a lot of attention for whatever reason. And one of the complaints that usually they talk about is like, I would love to follow boxing, but it's like it's hard to follow because I don't know who the champions are. There's so many belts, and sometimes I don't even. And sometimes I'd be like, and all you have to do is watch fights. But then I realize it just gets more ridiculous by the day. It's like, yeah, I completely agree with you. I completely agree that yes, there are too many belts. I mean, the interim titles. I think they're given out if I guess a regular champion if a champion can't defend his title within a certain amount of time or he's injured or whatever, they give they give a one contender one or two an interim title. I think the WBC does this. I don't know if the WBC does this. I think the WBC does this, and I think the IBF does it. I'm not too sure. But point blank, it's like, and then all of a sudden, then they don't fight each other. Like the interim titleists, and then the regular titles, they don't fight each other. And then you just have a whole bunch of other different lineages going on, and it gets to the point where you just don't know. And you have people interims, interims who lose the belt, and sometimes the interims, will get upgraded to full champion status for whatever reason. But it's just one of those things that you're frustrated. You're frustrated in seeing because there are a lot of fighters out there, that are calling themselves champions and they're not champions. Um, and of course the reason why why this is done, money. Sanctioning bodies are, for the most part, pretty corrupt, people, and More belts, more sanctioning fees, more money in the pockets for them. You know, they don't give a damn about the belt. I mean, the ring is probably the only one that actually I think that tries not to, because it's not an actual sanctioning body. It's usually a belt given to whoever is the man or the who has the lineal distinction in the division. And I mean, they do a decent job of it, more than others. But then, like I said, it's not an actual sanctioning body. They don't pay, you're not, as far as I know, you're not paying fees to actually call yourself the ring titleist. It's just one of those titles that's just given upon you. Um, so yeah, it's like you go. So yeah, I mean, as a box fan, I mean, I've watched this stuff for about 25 years, since 25, 26, since I was like 4 or 5. What? Probably more than that because I'm 31. Um, and you go from having WBC, WBA, and IBF, with the WBO and NABF and the USBA thrown in as the minor titles too. All these other titles that are coming in is just like, and it's just like, and it's overwhelming too. And and it was funny too. Also, there are and even outside of those belts, there are like the other minor, like the WBC, like Asian heavyweight title, or WBO or IBF Intercontinental, or Continental. I won't knock the Continental Americas, because I mean that's one of the titles that I know that's been around for a minute. I won't ever knock the title. Then we have like the WPA Pan, Pan Asiatic, or Pan Pacific, or you know, or Latino heavyweight title. Just a whole bunch of, there's just a whole bunch of useless titles that are just running around and just diluting who the champions are, simply because organizations just want the sanctuaries just want to put more money in their pocket. I mean, I would love it if they go back to the old days. Yes. So yes, if we have champions in WBC, WBA, and IBF, and WBO, fine. Fight the contenders, fine. If they're not, and if there's no mandatories, you fight and you unify to try to unify, so there's one fight, so at least there's an attempt at one championship in a division, and it used to happen a lot. Not just, I mean, most noticeably in heavyweight division. I mean, that's how Mike Tyson became undisputed, because I came put around, did the tournament, and and all that other stuff. And then I know Bernard Hopkins, when he won that middleweight, when he came undisputed in 2001. They exist. And then Roy had his light heavyweight titles. Well, everyone except the WBO title, but I won't get into that situation with Roy and his light heavyweight titles. But you know what I'm saying? It used to be like, yeah, you can fight your contenders, you fight your mandatories, but at least if you don't have a mandatory, then go after another champion, fight them, unify it, so there's one champion in this division. And to my knowledge, I don't think there in the divisions today. I don't think there is any division. And maybe I'm wrong. You guys could probably leave a comment to correct me if that's the case. But I don't think there's one division that has a unified champion, meaning at least they hold three. In this case, three of the four main. Oh no, that's not true. Because that would be Vlad, but that holds all four versions of the world titles with no, you know, the regular distinction. No interim, no super, no diamond, no silver, none of that other nonsense that's permeating. I don't think there is any today. I mean, if there is, feel free to correct me. Yeah, I can't think of anything. Yeah, the titles are, yeah, as they are. They're pretty splintered as it is. you know, but yeah. I mean, but that's how I feel. Like that's how I feel. If you're a Cardio champion, yes. If there's gonna be multiple champions, then at least have attempts to actually champions face other champions. But then, of course, yeah, I know that leads to more politics. I mean, mostly Golden Boy and Top Rank. There's I mean, in between that and the outside promoters, and then of course there's Germany. I know there's even. I mean, yes, it's easier said than done. And I know there's like other politics involved that makes pretty much unification a rare concept in the sport. And who even knows when the next time we'll actually see someone in a division that holds all four versions of the of that particular belt. But yeah, so yeah, that's what I was just wanting to vent on. It's just, I mean, it's ridiculous as a, when you can actually remember, when you can actually remember when, when you actually remember just saying like who's a champion in the division, or at least at the minimum what belts did they hold for the sanctioned body. And now you're saying like, champion A is regular, champion B is super, and all that, all that other stuff. It's like that. Stop it. That just needs to go. Um, I mean, that whole process, all this just need to be just wiped out, wiped clean. Not even, I mean, a major sanctioning body. I mean, will it help? I mean, if that's the case, then of course that'll mean that all these champions would have to drop their belts. And if you're going to have this one sanctioning body in order to pull this off, but and I mean, obviously, I don't really see that either. But my thing is, if you're gonna be all these multiple champions, then they should at least fight each other. No, at least try to unify these belts, because there's just too many of them. There's just too many running of them around, and there's too many fights that are being called title fights, which are not really title fights. You know. But so, I mean, pretty much that's just my little rant, my little view on, on the titles and on the top situation in boxing today. So yeah, I mean, I think this is probably this is like only my second video that I ever did. I talked, outside of a post-fight, review or anything. I did a pre-fight interview before for Coda Margarita too. So yeah, so yep, that's it, and you'll probably hear from me again on after the fights on Saturday, the HBO card and Andre Berto and Jesus Soto Caras, and because there's so many fights that you'll definitely get a review from me from about that fight. So until then, peace.